in Hollywood. Movies, TV, that matter. This is going to be chaired by Jim Burke. You've seen his work. The Descendants, Election, Downsizing, Green Book. Jim Burke, producer, and he'll introduce his panel.
Okay.
Gotcha. Hey, I'm Jim Burke, and I'm joined here by 3 artists, and we're going to discuss films that matter and TV shows that matter. First is Diarra Kilpatrick, who is a renowned actress, triple threat, actually. Actress, writer, and producer. And then T.J. Martin, Academy Award-winning documentarian of Undefeated. Great movie. And Dan Lindsay, also Academy Award-winning director of Undefeated. And they both, Dan and TJ, work as a team, and we are friends. We're all friends. And they made a film last year that if you haven't seen it, you should, called LA 92. It's a gripping story of Los Angeles and the riots in 1992. Yeah, very good. So we decided, or maybe I should say I decided, and I sprung it on these guys at the last minute, that we're not going to talk to you. We're going to talk to each other. And but what we're going to probably, the area that we're going to focus on is what movies matter and how do they matter. And so I'll just put it out to you to think about films or television shows that have impacted you in some sort of way, that have mattered to you personally, and then try to reverse engineer or something why that happened. Because in our cases, we try to engineer that at the front end, and but are also, we have to examine ourselves. I'll just speak for myself and then I'll be quiet. That oftentimes the movies that stick with me the longest are the ones that I'm not even sure I liked when I saw it. But I can't get them out of my head. And why is that? So does anybody want to start this off and just, what is it that matters? Well, let me ask this question. Do you ever go into a project and you're not quite sure what the sort of access point is for you, how it connects to you personally, but know that you are drawn to it and are interested in finding that out?
I'd venture to say that that is the access point. It's at least for myself, it's always it's a piece of music, it's a scene, it's a moment, it's one factoid. It's something that you can't get out of your head, and you just keep mulling over that. And it doesn't mean that you actually fully understand the narrative. You don't know how it's going to play out. You can't say that to your producers. You can't say that to your financiers. I don't know what the film is. But there's a kernel of something there that you just latch onto and you build from that standpoint. So I'll add, it's really the whole idea of making films or material or art that actually is meaningful and matter to the world or to yourself is really kind of a conflict with, it's like an inherent conflict with the industry itself to a certain degree. I think it was Dan, you always position it like this idea that like the industry is almost like 10-year-olds playing soccer and they just run towards wherever the ball is. So whatever kind of is, is hip in that moment in time doesn't always necessarily mean it's going to be something that matters to you. So how do you infiltrate that, which is an ongoing question, how do you infiltrate that and allow yourself to be put in a position where you can actually make films that are meaningful to you, and then as a result, if you do even get that opportunity, you start to recognize that there's a whole ocean of people that's meaningful for as well.
Yeah.
And that's just an ongoing conversation with every single project.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because as a creator, when I started, I wasn't thinking, I want to make something that matters. It's something that came out of me. And then people started telling me, oh, American Cocoa is this thing that matters. And I think it's really about art as a bridge to empathy and to connection. I was telling them I went to this wedding in Europe. I just got back, and it was so surprising that so many people had never been to Europe before, that had the means, that were in their 60s and 70s, and we're programmed to stay in our little bubbles, and we built these invisible fences around ourselves. And I think art is really the means to understanding what someone else is thinking, how someone else lives, how you can create empathy with somebody else. And so for me, that's always the artistic pieces that I'm drawn to. And that's, I think, what I was able to create because I came from outside the business. I was like in my apartment in Koreatown being like, what could I make? What can I write? And I think it just became something that was purely from my experience as a woman, as a black woman with big hair. You know, it became more and more specific. And I think people are drawn to that sort of authenticity and able to kind of step into a particular point of view that's not necessarily theirs.
I think what you're saying is, and TJ as well, like what you're saying is key. It's that you went in to make something because you wanted to make something, and not, I guess I've encountered a lot of problems when people try to make something because they think it matters. And in fact, the stuff that ends up connecting with people are things that come from you, or something that's important to you, and you have a unique point of view, and not, I'm going to change the world with this, or people have to hear this thing. You know, like TJ and I get approached a lot to do documentaries, and somebody has an agenda from the beginning, and it's like, well, that's not going to make a good film. Like, what makes a good film and what makes a good piece of art is discovery, and coming into something because you're maybe passionate about an idea, but allowing yourself to discover things along the way. And I think, personally, I just think that's what an audience connects to. There's so much talk and across all industries of authenticity. It's such a ridiculous word, but the key to it, I think, is speaking something that is true to yourself and not trying to be something.
Yeah, it's like you're kind of always vacillating between like preserving the integrity of the things that are meaningful to you. So, you know, for me, like, actually, Dan and I, neither of us went to film school. Sounds like we created our own path and like figured out a way to get our voices heard, get our work seen. But my primary focus is growing up mixed race is constantly like overly obsessed with race, class, gender, injustice. And so that is not something that you go into a pitch meeting that people are ready to just like hear and finance your ideas on that. But it doesn't mean that there's not merit to those things. And in your challenge as someone who has the privilege and the opportunity to actually make something is, how do you filter that through a story, and how do you filter that through a narrative? So you're constantly vacillating between preserving the integrity of what is meaningful to you, and then at the same time making sure that you're honing your craft and your skill set and making sure you're keeping the audience in mind, so that they're not, so one, you get an opportunity to make another film, and two, it's something that all those things that are meaningful to you actually have work on the back end. They actually work in terms of the emotion or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And so some of those results have been great. For example, when we did LA 92, which is about the civil unrest in 92 in Los Angeles, we intentionally screened the film in communities throughout the country that are kind of dealing with on a very consistent basis dealing with issues of police abuse and kind of abuse from a kind of authority, generally speaking. So, we screened it in Chicago, we screened it in Atlanta, we screened it in St. Louis. The result of that is to see an audience, to create a safe space for an audience that can continue the conversation after they've seen the material. And that's always something that is really important for us, is how do you make sure that the material doesn't live and die in the movie theater, but is taken outside of that space, and it hits you somewhere on a guttural level or in your heart or in your mind, and you take that conversation outside of theater and it lives beyond that. And that's not something that's not the first thing you do, that's not the intention, that's hopefully the result.
So, do you share my belief that there is sometimes magic that happens in a film? You can go, or a television show, you can go in there with the best intentions, and you can, sounds like we all do the same things. We make film or television shows to please an audience, in my case, an audience of one, myself. Yeah. I need to love it. And I need to love it for the reasons that I will discover, but I always think it's cool that other people love it, but they love it for completely different reasons. And but is it not true, though, that despite every time you're trying to make something, it's magic that happens when it really all comes together? And I don't know how to explain that, and I contend nobody does. Because if they did, this business would be easy.
I believe in magic. I also believe in a lot of hard work. There's a healthy combination of the two.
It's hard work. They're hard work even when they don't turn out that well.
Exactly.
Yeah? But it's always hard work. But there's something else. You want? I guess we're out. Yeah. But anyway.
Magic.
Yeah.
I believe in it. But I also believe that, to your point, it's the secret that nobody wants to say is nobody knows what they're doing.
That's right.
And you are literally making it up as you go along. The more we have gone along, the more nervous I get because people start to think that we know what we're doing. But you're to go back to the audience of one. You're trying to please what makes sense to you. That can be the only North Star that you have.
But I also believe in that artistry can exist on a sort of subconscious level. We're not even sure what it is that's driving us, and we may become conscious of it later, but in any event, I've been sort of given the hook here.
I would say this to end that thought. I think you're 100% spot on. I think there is a healthy combination of hard work and a healthy combination of something very magical that happens when you have you build a rapport with whoever your collaborators are. However, I think the idea is how do you make sure you tap into, how do you reverse engineer that idea? And how do you tap into that and harness it on the front end? How do you set up the variables that create a space for that to happen? And that goes along with basically feeling good about the story that you're going in to tell and looking at it and making sure at least in your heart and in your mind it kind of something is there, and then it facilitates that avenue. Yeah.
I completely agree. And can I guess we have to end, but I want to give a plug for, if you guys don't mind, for an upcoming film called Green Book, which opens this holiday season. Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali. And why I'm doing it is because the screenwriter, Nick Vallelonga, is here in the audience tonight, and he's written an amazing script, and his fellow producer. So anyway, if you don't like this film, I will personally apologize.
And refund the ticket price. Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pat. So the next panel is social media influence.